Hello and good afternoon. I'm your host Abdurrahim Kashur and this is the Al24 daily special coverage. Today's focus will be on Ukraine-Russia latest as well as the visit of Charles Michel, European Council President, to Algeria. UN nuclear watchdog says its experts found extensive damage at the plant in a report presented to the UN Security Council on Tuesday. Director General of the International Energy Agency, the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, said that his team closely witnessed a shelling in the vicinity of power plants and confirmed the presence of Russian soldiers and military equipment, saying that we are playing with fire and something very, very catastrophic could take place. On the other side of diplomacy, European Council President Charles Michel said on Monday that Algeria was a reliable energy partner. All these European envoys to Algeria recently are working day and night to find an alternative to the Russian gas supply that has been cut by the giant Gazprom company until a further notice or until Western sanctions lifted, as Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stated. To analyze all this information, I'm joined live by Mr. Abdel Nour Toumi from France, Maghreb Studies expert at Orzam Center of Ankara, and Mr. Andriy Chomenko, expert at Ukrainian Institute of Politics. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us in this debate. A short break and we start our debate. And before we delve into our discussion, let me read for you this piece of information. After a visit last week to Europe's biggest power plant, UN's nuclear watchdog has called for a safety and security protection zone. In the same line, the Director General of the IAEA condemned the shelling of the infrastructure, and Ukraine's president welcomed the agency's report, whereas the Russian ambassador to the UN said that the report didn't call things by their name.
But needs the representatives of the IAEA.
I remain gravely concerned about the situation in and around the Zaporizhia plant, including reports of recent shelling. Let's tell it like it is. Any damage, whether intentional or not, to Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia or to any other nuclear facility in Ukraine could spell catastrophe, not only for the immediate vicinity, but for the region and beyond.
The hits that this facility has received and that I could personally see and assess together with my experts is simply unacceptable. We are playing with fire and something very, very catastrophic could take place.
We are sorry that in your report on the implementation of security measures in Ukraine from April to September of this year, which appeared a few hours ago, the source of the bombing is not directly named. We understand your position as head of an international regulator, but in the current situation it is very important to name things by name.
Mr. Andriy, since you are in Ukraine, I'll be starting with you, and based on the information given, what is your reading and interpretation to the situation in Ukraine? What about the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant?
So the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, recently issued an address to the nation where he was disappointed by the behavior of the mission headed by Mr. Rafael Grossi from the International Atomic Energy Association, where he visited the Zaporizhia power plant at the beginning of September. And the main concern the president of Ukraine expressed is that Mr. Grossi did not allow independent journalists to follow him to visit the Zaporizhia power plant. And the president made it clear that he was not happy about such a decision of Mr. Grossi.
Very good indeed. Mr. Toumi, do you think that the latest visit by the IAEA inspectors will secure the nuclear facility of Zaporizhzhia from further shelling?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Yes, it is indeed, and as the head of the IAEA, Mr. Grossi, put it, we cannot, and I am putting this pronoun between brackets, cannot play with fire. And also, since the war is now has passed its 6 months and has entered, into a new approach, which is the three-dimensional levels, meaning by this, after the communication one, now the economic one, there is another element here, it's the psychological one. And actually both belligerents are worried about, and this is why the report that came out from the AIA, and even was very, very prudent, and they choose carefully the diplomatic lexicon because of the sensitivity of the issue. And I think not only the Ukrainian people and also the entire Europe and regions are still traumatized by the Chernobyl effect. So this war is now entered again after the communication, the economic, now it's the psychological aspect. And I think not only the main belligerent and also the entire regional players and international players don't want to see such an apocalyptic scenario will take place.
Mm-hmm. Quite indeed, very good. Now, let's tackle the second point in our discussion. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, stated that Russian gas supplies to Europe will not resume until Western sanctions against Moscow are lifted. Peskov clarified the sanctions were the sole reason behind Russia's decision to shut down Nord Stream 1 pipeline. Peskov's comment came amid a deepening energy crisis across Europe that was further worsened after Gazprom announced that a 3-day maintenance work due to an oil leak in one of the Nord Stream 1's turbines will extend until further notice.
You know that the problems with the pumping occurred because of the sanctions, which have been imposed against our country and a number of companies by Western states, including Germany and the UK. Other reasons that would cause problems with the pumping don't exist. Of course, there is one unit turbine remaining, and it also malfunctions and breakdowns occur. This leads to the pumping stopping, given that the sanctions continue to work, given that they bring a legal and practical mess into what is related to technical maintenance of all the knots and the units. Right now, we can only hope for this one unit, for bringing it somehow back in order.
Coming back to you, Mr. Andrei, we all know that Russia is using the energy sector as a leverage or even as a weapon against all European countries whom they are claiming. But do you think there is another solution for Russia to avoid sanctions by not using its energy card? I believe this is the only key to fight back the sanctions. Don't you agree on this?
I want to bring up a famous author that wrote about war. He lived 2 centuries ago. His name is Karl von Clausewitz. And he wrote about the war as the compilation of various factors, where warfare itself is only a small part of it. So when we talk about natural gas supply from Russia to Europe, there is a purpose Putin is heading to. So he tries to disrupt the unity between the European governments and their populations. So I think that the main point that Europeans should focus on is to restore the balance, the trust of the populations to their governments. And right now, Putin chose a strategy of creating this unity between European countries, governments, and their populations.
What's Mr. Andrei saying with you? Do you think, even that as a Ukrainian, do you think this is the right way to be played? If Ukraine has got this energy supplies and the energy sector that Russia has got, will they play with this in a fairly way? Do you think this is something wrong according to the agreements done by the European countries as well as Russia?
So what we currently see right now in Ukraine is a critical crisis between Russia and the West. So, and both parties, they impose certain kinds of sanctions against each other, as it happened to various companies that pulled out of Russia as the war broke out. And also the purpose of the sanctions, according to Clausewitz, was to, to create social unrest inside Russia. But in turn, Russia retaliates by reducing the supply of natural gas to Europe, creating the same kind of threat, trying to create panic in Europe because of the upcoming winter and energy prices went up.
Very good. We will come to this point of the winter coming. Mr. Abdel Noor Toumi, don't you think it's quite logical from Russia to boycotting gas supplies to European countries? Because before this, these countries tried their hardest to destroy the Moscow's economy by imposing numerous sanctions. And now that Russia is acting against their suicidal sanctions policy, they are blaming Russia for weaponizing the energy sector. What are you saying about this? And is Russia has the right to act like this, Mr. Abdel Noor?
I mean, the question is not about right or logic thing, because war is war. And of course, I mean, when you are in the hard and tough game, I mean, you have to show your strength and also play all your cards. And this is one of President Putin's strong cards is using. And I think he knew that, I mean, President Putin, this will actually harm Europe from the beginning of this war. And on the other hand, he knows also that how Europe, especially, I would say that Donald Rumsfeld put it, the old Europe is in panic mode. And I mean by this, France, Italy, and Germany, actually the leaders are, I mean, praying day and night to end this war quickly and soon. But unfortunately, it's not going to be that way, because this war is going to be too long. And President Putin knows that. And also, he knew also that he has this card. He is pressuring not only the EU, but also all, like for instance, even the UK. So the Europeans are trying, actually, they have been showing their support to the Ukrainian people and playing the least we can do, but showing this coherence. But unfortunately, it's not working, and they are not that coherent as they sound.
Very interesting point you have raised. Now let's tackle another topic, which is also related to the same story of energy supplies. President Tebboune had a face-to-face meeting with the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, who said that Algeria is a reliable energy partner, while stressing the need to revise the association agreement between Algeria and the European Union, EU, by finding joint priorities in mutual interest of both parties.
We consider that the international circumstances that we know, energy cooperation is obviously essential, and we see in Algeria a reliable, loyal and committed partner. We had an extremely fruitful, forward-looking meeting with President Tebboune. We share a common ambition to give new impetus to the quality of relations between Algeria and the EU. We consider that the association agreement is a framework that should give rise to improvements with the will on both sides to identify joint priorities in mutual interests. Algeria and the EU have a common ambition for stability, security and prosperity. In this regard, we discussed with President Tebboune a number of situations related to the neighborhood and the geopolitical context. We are extremely optimistic to develop more strongly and more determinedly a partnership that leads to a concrete and tangible result for the citizens of Algeria and the European Union.
Sir Abdel Noor Toumi, as clearly seen, do you think that Algeria is capable of replacing the Russian gas in Europe? And if it is so, and if it is able, would Algeria provide what Europe is looking for, taking into consideration the Russian-Algerian relations, if you know what I mean?
Actually, Algeria will be again a major player in terms of supplier to Europe as an alternative for the Russian gas. It's not going to be enough for Europe to fill this gap from the Russian gas, but Algeria also is now in strong position, speaking of the partnership with the EU, and as the president of the European Council qualified Algeria as a serious and trustworthy partner, not only economically, but also on some security issues. And we saw that in the latest development in Mali and how the Europeans are concerned after the withdrawal of France from Mali that left a serious security and political vacuum. Now, and we know the European know that Algeria will be one of their alternatives. And actually, very interesting, and I think the visit of the president of the European Council, after his visit, he just flew to Doha, to Qatar, and they are looking also from that window as they are looking to Azerbaijan. So now, again, as I said, Europe is in a panic mode, and they are looking for all alternatives. But on the other hand, I will argue also, it is a good opportunity for Algiers, not only, to position itself on this posture, and also to eventually renegotiate the agreement, the partnership agreement with the EU that was signed in 2002 and took place in 2005. At that time, Algeria was in the weak position, but today is in strong position and can review that to position itself seriously and strongly on this issue, on this dynamic of that is shaping the regional and international geopolitics.
Quite understood. Thank you so much for this explanation. Mr. Andre, the whole European countries are looking now for an alternative to the Russian gas. Italy, at the very beginning, already secured its status in this matter by signing new agreements with Algeria. But what about the rest of Europe, especially Germany? They couldn't make a deal with the Qatari side, and winter is on doors. And what about Ukraine at the same time? How they are preparing themselves to the coming winter?
Yes, I did a research on that, and currently 1/3 of all natural gas in Europe comes from Russia, and it's about 160 billion cubic meters of natural gas. And at the moment, no country can replace Russia as a supplier of natural gas, and Russia plays this card. For example, there was a commentary by the Qatari Minister of Energy in March this year, and he said that Qatar is not ready to make out for the shortage of Russian natural gas in the market. Qatar is going to increase the natural gas supply in a matter of 3 years, but it's still a too long time for Europe to wait. And the only hope for Europe is the United States of America. It also tries to increase the production of the natural gas, but it will take several years again, until 2025 at least. There is no alternative to Russian natural gas in Europe.
And Mr. Andrew, what kind of solutions that the European Union could tackle to find an alternative for Russian gas? You say there is no alternative, but at least what is the permanent solution for the meantime?
So, as you know, Europe is quite preoccupied with transition to the so-called green energy, such as solar panels and wind turbines. But it was also in the light of reducing or abandoning the production of coal and electricity made by the coal-fired plants. But now Europe goes back to the practice of purchasing coal and firing coal to produce electricity.
Very, very interesting. Mr. Abdel saying in the same topic. Now, you have heard my question and what I have addressed. If let me say, if Algeria could manage to be a replacement for Russia gas, would that harm the relationship between Algeria and Russia?
No, I don't think so. It will, disturb the excellent relations between Moscow and Algiers. I would argue to the contrary. It will give a chance to Algiers to have a serious independent foreign policy, and also, again, to position itself toward or vis-à-vis its European partners who have been not taking Algeria seriously for in the last years. So this is the time for the Algerian diplomacy to position itself, and also taking this approach, or to some extent a doctrine of diversify its partners. So, and Moscow understands that and knows also the power and also the way of Algeria in the region, and how Russia now is pushing its pawns smoothly, not only in the Maghreb and notably Libya, but also in the Sahel, therefore in Africa.
Perfectly understood, Mr. Abdel. Now let's tackle another topic which is very important. Russian President Vladimir Putin said it would be impossible to isolate Russia, and that Moscow would defy that West's attempts to push Russia off the global stage. Speaking at the Economic Forum in the eastern city of Vladivostok, Putin said that Russia saw more opportunities in entering markets in the Middle East and Iran, following imposition of sweeping Western sanctions in response to Russia's military campaign in Ukraine.
Yesterday, Gazprom and its Chinese partners decided to move to rubles and yuan in 50-50 split when paying of Russian gas supply. I would add that short-sighted actions have spurred global inflation. It has already surpassed records that have been set many years ago in various countries. We are now focused on developing our infrastructure in the East. This will open new possibilities for Russian companies to access markets in Iran, India, countries of the Middle East and Africa, and of course also to supplies coming from these countries.
Mr. Andrew, once you have an important assets, you simply work on those strong pillars that it cannot easily replace. For instance, Ukraine and its agricultural production to the whole world. It's very important. Ukraine is using grain and wheat production as a window to breathe from a devastating war, just like Russia now is doing with the energy sector, facing the sanctions imposed on its economy. So how do you find Putin's actions so far? And do you think this sanctions policy will cripple Russia and bring a solution to Ukraine?
So, as I mentioned, Karl von Clausewitz earlier, he also said that the war is the last resort when, political instruments were not effective. So, like, when we're talking about the so-called grain deal that took place between Ukraine and Turkey, that allowed Ukrainian cargo, Ukrainian wheat, to go through the Black Sea to the world market. Recently, Vladimir Putin also said that he gave a hint that he could reconsider this so-called grain deal. And he hinted that he could, partner with Turkey to stop the transportation of Ukrainian grain to the world market. And it shows us that, indeed, there are quite few options for Ukraine in this case, if Turkey will prefer partnering with Russia than Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Quite interesting. Mr. Abdel Nortoumi, as clearly seen and as clearly what was saying Mr. Vladimir Putin, hey, if you are not paying by ruble, if you are not lifting the sanction, I will dispatch the Russian gas from the whole European continent toward Asia, notably the major allies such as China and India. What that's supposed to mean? And could Europe survive without the Russian energy for a long time, Mr. Abdel Nortoumi?
And this is, again, another card in the hands of President Putin. And he, again, as I stated earlier, I mean, he knows well how Europe is, I mean, the European leaders how are in a panic mode and also are worried about the coming winter, how their people will face it. But on the other hand, I don't think President Putin could or can continue to use this card in the long term, because the Europeans also are looking for alternatives, but also are having some strategies. And even, even in the short term, I'm sure they will go to use their strategic reserves and so on. So on this stance, so President Putin in the short, mid-term, could continue to threaten and to pressure the Europeans, but in the long term, it's going to be a very tough possibility to use as keep threatening the Europeans. But also he knew well that he has, again, this opportunity to, again, to find these buyers and partners, notably China and India. But it has to be careful with the Chinese, because there is some Chinese pragmatism that could, I would say, not switch, but at least will tackle a little bit his long-term strategy. I mean, by this President Putin.
Very good indeed, and very good point you have raised at the last point. Now, the Pentagon on Tuesday reported that Russia approached North Korea for ammunition. Press Secretary of the Pentagon said that move was indicative of the challenge Russia faces in sustaining its special military operation in Ukraine.
Russia has approached North Korea to request ammunition. I'm not able to provide any more detail than that at this point in time, but it does demonstrate and is indicative of the situation that Russia finds itself in terms of its logistics and sustainment capabilities as it relates to Ukraine. Certainly, as has been said, we assess that things are not going well on that front for Russia. So the fact that they're reaching out to North Korea is a sign that they're having some challenges on the sustainment front.
Very good. So 3 minutes left for us in this discussion. Mr. Andre, if Russia creates a very strong alliance in the Asian continent with so many countries, how Ukraine and Europe are going to face this new economic, political, and even military coalition?
I want to start with the commentary of President of France, Emmanuel Macron, when he recently said that, the quote, the age of abundance is over, end quote. So that's literally, although I'm surprised to hear that from a European leader, but Europe and Ukraine should, if they value European values more than economic values, then they should stand for it. So many European politicians, they speculate on a prevalence and dominance of values over economic matters. So this is the right time to prove they were telling the truth. And Europe is more about the values than about abundance, as Emmanuel Macron put it.
Very good indeed. Mr. Abdel Toumi, what are you saying about this? And don't you think that the European measures and the way they are tackling this war, they are just pushing Putin, Russia, to create alliance in the Asian continent?
Actually, they did. And again, the European, their policy, they are trying to show to the world and to their local public opinions. I think the Ukrainians got it. And they are just telling them they're doing just the least we can do. They are really, really concerned about the impact, the economic impact of this war locally, meaning by this. And President Macron, just days ago, he mentioned and he addressed his fellow citizens and telling them, you should to get ready and you should even to reduce your energy consumption by 10%. And this is what is making him, it's not, his message is not coherent, because on one hand, he's pushing for, playing a hawkish to be like war hawkish, but on the other hand, he is playing it, softly as a dove. So again, this war is going to be too long, and the Europeans, they knew well, meaning by this, Germany, Italy, France, and even some new Europe. I mean, the Hungarians and even the Polish knew it is going to be very, very tough for them. And unfortunately, it's going to be too long, and we don't know how it's going to end.
Mr. Abdelnour Toumi from France, Mr. Andriy from Ukraine, thank you so much for taking part in this debate. And to this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us in this discussion. And for now, all I can say, take care of yourself and have a blessed day.